So this talk is introduction to the 500 startups growth process. So when you came into 500 startups, part of it was for exposure to Silicon Valley and to raise money. The other part of it was for how to grow your company. So this week is sort of a kickoff for everything that you've been doing, for everything you will do to grow in the next 4 months that you're here. I know that most of you have met with your DPOCs. Actually, is there any team here that has not heard from your distro point of contact? You have not. What is the name of your team? Ellsworth. Okay. Okay. All right. I will make sure you guys hear from him today. Oh, okay. So this is better for people online, so I will just yell. I will use the word DPOCs often. It's distro point of contact, so the person who will be working with you one-on-one for your growth process. So we will walk through sort of the growth process that all your DPOCs will follow one form or the other of this process. As you know, startups are very, they're different from each other. So it may not suit everybody exactly, but it works for the most part. And we'll also look through introduction of Marketing Hell Week itself, which talks are relevant to you. I know if you've been to growth.500.co, there's a bunch of talks listed in the schedule there, and there are many B2B companies who came by and asked which ones are relevant to me and which ones are not. We'll go through that in this talk. I can walk through every talk and you will understand. You can ask me questions on whether it's relevant to you or not. And I also know that you have schedules in your calendar. The most updated one will be in growth.500.co and not in the calendar. Unfortunately, I apologize for that. And this site will also have the slides. After every talk, before the end of the day, the slides will go up in the schedule page of this site, of the sub-site. And also the videos, we are doing high-def videos. They will be available in 2 to 3 weeks. So if you want to go rewatch the talks and whatever else. Obviously, the advantage of being here live is you can ask questions, personalized questions to the speaker. So that's the advantage of being here. Also, homework for tomorrow. I hope many of you did the homework for today, which was Brian Balfour's Growth Machine video. The homework for tomorrow is, this is also in your pre-work page, which I shall go to quickly here to show you. So that's growth.500.co. That's your, and here is your pre-work page. So I hope you saw this Building a Growth Machine talk, and then the personas and hooks. I believe this is a 30-minute talk, and there's the slides and the worksheets and everything that go with that. This is super interesting, again, for you to... what this helps you with is like to create the right kind of hooks for the different people you could be selling your product to. Whether you're doing customer development or sales or marketing, it's good to create this as a grid of what are the different value propositions and who is it going to apply to, and we'll use that as inputs to some of the things we do tomorrow, and especially day 3 and 4 when we do customer acquisition talks, it'll be super relevant. All right, going back to the slides. All right. Something is wrong. Ooh, I gave away the answer. Okay, so the important question, should my startup focus on growth? How many of you think that you have to grow? Okay, how many of you think you don't have to grow right now? Why would that be? Okay, perfect. So his answer is he has to figure out what is going to scale first. So in other words, whether you do have product market fit or not. Right, so that is the answer to this. So what you're going to do, what sort of experiments you're going to run, what sort of process you're going to have, what sort of data you're going to look at, and the metrics you're going to track totally is going to depend on whether you are a pre-product market fit or a post-product market fit startup. Don't get overwhelmed by this table. We'll go through each of these point by point, but the main point is, I believe about 10% of you are pre-product market fit, everybody else is post-product market fit, and the slight differences in how we go through the growth process for each of you. So if you are a pre-product market fit, your goal is not growth. Your goal is to get to product market fit. And what is product market fit? So You have a product that solves a problem well enough for a big enough market. So you have all started these, you've built these products, or you have an MVP, or you at least have an idea because you've either identified a solution, you have identified a pain point that you think you can solve using your technology, or some of you engineers have come up with a cool technology that you're trying to find customers for. That type usually doesn't work, but there are startups that have worked that way as well. But anyway, either way, for those who are pre-product market fit, you are trying to figure out what is the one product or a core behavior that is going to solve a problem well enough for a customer segment that they're going to come back and use it again and again and again. Am I going too fast? Okay. Am I providing some sort of a core value or a good enough value proposition that I have a set of customers who are going to come back and use the product repeatedly for a long enough period of time? Only then you have something that you can scale. So there's no point prematurely scaling something that doesn't work. So when you are in a pre-product market fit startup, you're going to be iterating, you're going to be doing a lot of hustling, a lot of non-scalable work, and you're going to be doing major pivots. So what that means is you're going to be doing macro iterations, not tiny optimizations, not your button color or even changing a smaller segment of what's happening. It's not optimization, but macro iterations on product features. One of the things you're going to do is product features. So I'll give an example. Before this, I had a 500 startups funded startup. So I was in batch 12. My startup was called, it still is called, Activity Hero. It's a local marketplace connecting parents with summer camps and after-school activities. My co-founder is a mom with 2 kids. She found it very hard to find summer camps for her kids. So we started that, and we started it off as a marketplace. So, we scraped, Yelp was our, what we were looking to emulate. So we scraped a bunch of supply, put it all in one place. We thought this would make it easy for parents to make decisions on which summer camps to go to. And we struggled with that for quite a while, and we kept iterating on product features until we came up with like 2 features. One was for the supply side to manage their inventory, so their inventory is up to date on the website. So not just which summer camp to go to, but which one has availability was big for parents to know. And the second part was making it easy for them to register. So we went from a Yelp model to an open table model. It all became about registrations and inventory management. So whoever among you is iterating for product market fit, you will find that there are multiple ways you can solve the problem, and you're iterating on the product features that brings you that comes up with that one core action or core behavior, that minimum viable product that your customers are going to use again and again and again and come back to you to do it because they can do it using your product or your service better than anywhere else. So your macro iterations on product features, and also your target audience. Again, with my startup, we thought we were solving problems for all parents. And one of the things you will do with an early stage startup is, because you don't know exactly who you're targeting, I mean, you have an idea of who you're targeting, but that doesn't mean those people will end up being your customers. You always start with your hypothesis of what the right customer segment is, but as you experiment, you figure out better who exactly your customer segment is. So you're iterating on your target audience, meaning, so we had a range of, we thought we were targeting all parents 0 through 18, and over iterations we figured out, no, we are only targeting parents 5 through 12, like with kids ages 5 through 12. So that sort of iteration, some of you might shift from B2B to B2C to B2B, or the other way around as well, so depending on where you are in your stage. And the third thing is messaging. This is also another big iteration you will do before product market fit. You might have the right problem and the right solution identified, but you don't have the right messaging. So people don't know, they're not aware that this is what your solution solves the problem for them. So these are the macro iterations, and most of it is non-scalable work. I'll give you some examples and I'll ask you. So for my startup, I'd go stand outside schools. I was a complete stalker, always standing outside schools. I had like people show me the finger and like yell at me and stuff like that. But and you learn things like, you don't ever stand between people and their food. So if you're waiting outside restaurants, you don't stop people who are going into a restaurant. You stop them when they're coming out of a restaurant. Similarly, in the train station, they're just waiting to get on the train. You talk to them. But if you're doing customer development on people who are getting off the train, they don't have time to talk to you, and so on and so forth. So you learn interesting things, and you do a lot of non-scalable stuff like posting on Quora, for example. We posted a bunch in like, what do you call this, email lists at work, where, personal email lists at work where people could email their colleagues and so on. So you're doing a bunch of non-scalable work because you don't know exactly whether you have the right product, right features, the right messaging, or the right target audience. So you are not turning on the tap or the fire hose of customer acquisition yet. You're just casting a net and seeing if that works. So you're casting a net to, like, say, 100 customers and your potential customers, and you're checking whether your product resonates with them, your messaging resonates with them, if they're the right target audience, right? So most of the work you're doing is non-scalable. Anyone can give me examples of types of non-scalable work you did to start off, to kickstart your customer acquisition?
Just go around to coffee shops and talk to people.
So, yes. Events and meetups, yes. That's another great way to do that. Okay. We have a lot more, so we'll keep going. All right. And initially, the type of data that you have is very, very qualitative in nature. You don't have what they call statistical significance in your data. You don't have enough data points to make sense out of it. Let's say you only have data from 10 people, and 3 of them are a certain way and 7 of them have a different kind of result. You can't be like, oh, 30% showed something, because 10 is not significant enough for those changes to matter. So most of the data that you have in super early stage is very qualitative. And I know, working with many of you, I know you're still setting up your analytics or event-based analytics to get a whole bunch of quantitative data, which you'll see in post-product market fit. But most of the data you have pre-product market fit is very qualitative in nature. So what customers love about you, there's this famous Sean Ellis survey. It's like a 2-minute survey you send out to your customers and ask them, how would you describe my product to your friend? And how unhappy would you be if I removed feature X, or if you could not do XYZ starting tomorrow? And you'd measure how disappointed they would be if you remove that feature. So that's sort of qualitative data, and NPS, how likely they are to recommend to a friend. But this part is important. So this is one quantitative metric for you to understand whether you have product market fit or not. So this is looking at your retention, your cohort analysis. Speaking of the schedule, tomorrow talk at 10 o'clock is all about retention and cohort analysis. I know the sexy thing to do in marketing is to go get new customers, but the most important thing to do is retain existing customers. Anybody who runs a business will tell you it's more expensive to get a new customer than to keep your existing customer happy. So retention is the #1 metric in any startup. If you're not good at retaining your users, even take Twitter for example, right? So they were good at acquisition, but the retention is not so great. They've sort of run out of internet to acquire. Without retention, your product doesn't, you just don't have product market fit. So just to explain what this curve is, what on the x-axis is, and we'll look at this a little later as well. Retention is how many times, or let me phrase this correctly. Does a user come back after a week or 2 weeks and 3 weeks and 4 weeks and a month and 6 months and 12 months? Or what percentage of your users come back? That is retention. So in this chart, about 45% of your users have retained, or they're still using your product after whatever that is, 20 days or 20 months or whatever the x-axis is. And that is the most important metric for your startup, is what percentage have retained. I think the speaker will show it you tomorrow. If not, I have like standard retention rates. You can find it on the internet, whether you're an e-commerce business, you're a enterprise business, or a marketplace, depending on the type of business. Like for messaging apps, for example, what type of retention rates are sort of the industry standards. You can find those online. Just for you to imagine this, this is like if you are product B that doesn't have product market fit, you're literally pushing in new customers. You're bringing in new customers, and they're all churning out by the time you hit 20 days. So by the time you hit 20 days, none of the customers you acquired 20 days ago are still in your product, which just makes it super expensive to build your product. You're just not scaling in a economical way. All right. So if your pre-product market fit, just to recap, what you are working on is not growth. You're working on trying to get to product market fit. And you're doing this by doing macro iterations on product messaging and your target customer. And most of this work is non-scalable, and you're focused on engagement and retention as your main metrics. And most important, both for pre-product market fit and post-product market fit, is that you're learning fast. Because you as a startup, some of you have money, most of you don't. What you have is your time and your resources. So what we're trying to do here is, how do you learn as fast as you can without burning yourself out, without running out of, before you run out of money, right? How do you get to the next stage and move? How many of you have this kind of a flat retention curve? You already know your startup has good retention. Okay. All right, so a lot of work to do for everybody else. Whatever we go through for the post-product market fit, in terms of how they're going to run the process to grow, it'll be the same process that you will be running for you to iterate on your product features and messaging and customers as well. So the process will remain the same. Okay. Post-product market fit. So you already have, for the few people who raised your hands, you already have a product that has a good enough value proposition that a certain segment of your customers love, and they come back and use again and again, and they're using it for a while, right? So you have great retention. So now what you want to do now is, how do I scale this? How do I get more such people economically? And how do I scale this in a repeatable and predictable way? Because if you want to raise money for 18 months from now, they're going to ask you where you're going to be at. So you want to be predictable, you want to be repeatable. Because you can't be, you've grown up enough to not throw spaghetti at the wall anymore and hope for it to stick, right? This is the part where you're growing up and you start to need to act like an adult with your growth. All right, so where does this scalable, repeatable, predictable thing come from? It all comes from Japanese manufacturing. So these guys had this thing called Six Sigma, and which means they only were aiming for just one fault in like 1 million pieces they produced. So they had all this like Toyota production system, and you would have heard of these words called Kaizen and 5 Whys and Lean and Kanban. All these processes were started by Japanese manufacturing. They were started in Japanese manufacturing plants to reduce the number of errors that they had. And then all the business people adopted it for OODA loops and PDCA and so on for business processes. And the software people adopted it as Waterfall, Kanban, and Scrum. So for all the engineers out here, in your software development, if you know exactly what your customers want, you have a waterfall process. But when you use the requirements and are not certain at all, you use a process like Scrum or Agile, where you're continuously iterating. And you as a startup, because your users, everything about you is super unknown, because you're dealing with people, your customers are people. So you don't know exactly what the requirements are. You're creating a completely new product for usually a new market. So you will be using some form of Scrum, both in your software, and we're going to use something similar for your growth as well. So hope this makes sense. The main reason to use that again is, how many of you have this experience of, and I experienced this with my startup, you feel like you're working 20 hours a day, you feel like you're doing a lot, but there are not enough results. Just because you're working so much, you're not able to zoom out and take a look and have a very objective perspective on how far you've grown, how much farther you have to grow. And that's what a process does. It's like you having a counselor or a coach or somebody you go to every week. So every time let's say you have a weekly Scrum meeting or a weekly growth meeting, that's what you do. You zoom out and take a look at, what did I do last week? Objectively, how much did it grow my startup? What can I do to make it better? And so that way you're not burning yourself out, you're making the best use of your resources, which is literally you and your time. Is this like too theoretical, boring? Just please stop me anytime you have any questions, otherwise I'll just keep rattling on. And yeah, we can keep this interactive, it'll be more fun. Yes. So for those of you who came in late, everything will be on growth.500.co. So all these slides will go on there by the end of today. Every day at the end of the day, the slides will go on there. We're doing high-def videos that will go on there 2 to 3 weeks from now. Yes.
We don't really know for pre or post product market fit, honestly. Like our product works really well for some of our users, but we're still doing a lot of the like hustling and other product market fit things you were talking about. I mean, is it possible to be in like a Schrodinger's cat situation or both at the same time? Or what do you make of that?
So two parts to that answer. One is you're always working on product market fit, right? You're always trying to get that retention curve up. And when you first build your product, you're building it for a niche, right? As your early adopters, as you run out, as you want to expand your business, as you build more features or try to go get more customers, your retention curve will start going down. Again, you'll start working on bringing it up. Okay, so you're always working on it's a never-ending road to product market fit, number one. And I forgot the second part of the answer. Oh yeah, and there's also an awkward teenager transition phase from where you're hustling to where you get to the adult stage where you have repeatable, scalable, predictable growth. So you could also be in that awkward teenager phase where you think you have product market fit because that's what you intuitively feel because you speak to your customers and they all love it, but you don't have exactly the numbers because you've not been measuring it long enough, or you don't have enough users, you've not turned on the tap and had a fire hose of users come in for you to actually check this on like millions of people to see if they all love it. So that might also be the reason why you're in that awkward teenager phase where you're not really sure of your identity. For the most part, if it's reassuring, most people here are either in the awkward teenager phase or like slightly before the awkward teenager phase. Nobody here has, unfortunately, all kinds of good metrics set up, like good tracking set up to know exactly what your users are doing, and also who your users are and where they're coming from, or a large number of users to be certain about many of these things. Good question. Any other questions? Yes.
So if we're in that teenager phase, like, should we be focused on both the pre and post, like, product market fit activities?
So going back to, I want to go back to that same slide. Okay, so just imagine both these are bolded. The most important thing in your pre-product market fit is you're focused on engagement and retention, right? You want to make sure your users are happy. So engagement and retention, does anyone know what the difference between engagement and retention is? I know it's used very, interchangeably. He's raised his hand.
Engagement is that they like your product, retention is they come back.
Well, that's a simple and good explanation. Yes, engagement means they spend X amount of time every time they come, or they open up your app, 2 times a day or whatever, 3 times a week. And retention is they're still there 1 month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now. What percentage of people come back and use it over a period of time is retention. The reason why engagement and retention should always be your top metric is because you can't grow nonsense. Your product has to be good. Like, you have to provide some value. Otherwise, there's a whole bunch of startups. Does anyone remember those viral videos that used to be posted on Facebook? Just because your friend watched it, it would automatically share it, and then you were forced to watch it and it would automatically share on your wall. They grew really, really quickly, but it was a crappy product and crappy retention. So they even though they grew really fast, and I believe they sold as well when they were still high, it just died because it actually was not a really good value proposition, and they had no retention of any sort for people to come back and use the product. It was not compelling enough. So engagement and retention, just basic business sense, unless you have a good product, you can't sell it. I mean, you just won't have repeated customer usage. So that's always your top metric. So your question was, what metrics should you focus on, or what sort of activities should you be doing if you're sort of in the awkward teenager phase? I would always obviously keep my engagement and retention in focus. Super important to make sure I have that. But in terms of process itself, it's pretty similar. We'll see that the types of things you'll be doing, whether you're pre or post product market fit, are pretty similar, just your goals are slightly different. And then once you are post product market fit, you'll be focused on growth rate itself. And we'll look through how to do that. So you'll be doing if you're on one side or the other, you can surely say, okay, I'll ignore everything else and I'll focus only on engagement and retention, or you can say, I'm mainly focused on growth rate because I know my engagement retention is good. Because you're on both, you sort of have to do sort of both. Any other questions? Okay. So we saw how to do the scalable, repeatable growth. So basically what I'm telling you is we're going to, I know all you are like sort of cowboys, like, shoot from the hip kind of thing, but you've got to grow up now and start using processes and make your growth predictable. So startups took this from manufacturing, from business processes, from software, and applied this to software development, and they called it lean, right? The lean startups. So that's the main thing about lean startups is you build some sort of an MVP because you have your assumptions of who your customer is and what sort of problems they have, what sort of solutions they want, and what sort of messaging and so on. And you measure and you learn. It's pretty much the same process, simplified. And how many of you watched the Brian Balfour video, The Homework? Or how many of you did not watch it, I guess? Okay. Thank you. Please do go watch it today. And also, even those who watched it, go watch it another 3 weeks from now. When you're following the process, it'll make more sense to you. So that sort of is the process that we will be following even for growth. Very similar. You're trying to run you have a set of hypotheses, you run a bunch of experiments, and you learn from that and run more experiments. It's a similar process. So post-product market fit, you're going for scalable, repeatable growth, and the experiments that you're running, they're all focused on optimization and expansion. So when you're pre-product market fit, you wanted to know if your solution was right, if you had the right product features, if you had the right target audience, and if you had the right messaging. But now that you have product market fit, what you're going to be doing is, okay, let's tighten up that funnel. Wherever the leaks are, let's plug those leaks, and let's expand to newer target audiences. So if I was targeting, a really small niche, how do I expand this? And what do you optimize on, and how do you expand? So you look at your funnel. So I'll just go through this quickly, but all of this will be covered today, later, and tomorrow. So you look at your funnel, which is your user behavior funnel, and you try to figure out where the leaks are and how to optimize them. You define what is the most important metrics for you, and you do a sensitivity analysis to see which one of your drivers is most important for you to work on first so you can prioritize. So all of this will be covered today and tomorrow. And then you look at newer acquisition channels, and that'll be covered day 3. And then you build new features. Now that comes back to you as a product visionary, what you come up as your product roadmap, that part. And I'll just quickly show you what this looks like. At the end of it, let's say all of this is super clear to you and you're working with your growth mentor, you will end up having an Excel sheet that looks like this. When the Excel sheet shows up, it'll be less blank than this. Okay, so you will put together your OKRs. Come on. Okay, you'll put together your OKRs, either a simple KPI template or a more complex one, which we'll look quickly at. And then you'll have a backlog of all the ideas you want to be testing, and then you'll have a status on, hey, what is it that I'm doing this week that's affecting the different parts of the funnel. And then at the end of the week, you look at it and say, how much did I grow this week? And your business will be in sort of this format. And this is a very simple KPI sheet. Are you able to see this at all, or should I zoom in? Okay, so this is a very simple KPI sheet. We'll be walking through this later in the afternoon. Sorry, I'm going to do something else, actually. Okay, so this, right after this talk, the second talk is going to be about, your most important metric, how to identify it, and then your R funnel itself. What does your user behavior funnel look like? And it'll make more sense when he talks about it. And then how to optimize a funnel is the third talk this afternoon. And then what to measure, that's your KPIs. So once you have all of that, you would put them in this sheet. So this is what, for this business, revenue is their one metric that matters. And they've decided that okay, the number of sales or subscriptions is my top level KPI, and it breaks down into average amount of sales or customers, and what are the different drivers, and just one part of the funnel. This is a super simple half a business that I've put together here, right? There's all other parts of the funnel, so many other drivers, and depending on whether you're a B2B, B2C, media, marketplace, your funnels will look, your KPI sheets will look slightly different. But the point of having this is this. Week over week, you can look at how much did I grow? How much has my top level metric grown? And for a startup your size, a healthy growth would be like 5 to 7% a week, like, you know, about 30% a month, because you're all super early stage. You know, the smaller you are, the easier it is to grow faster. This is a compound growth rate. As you get bigger, hitting that 30% a month will be super hard. So you should be aiming for some big growth goals. So this is for you to, as I said, just like a therapist, like an external person coming and looking at you or your startup's health, you will do this once a week. This is a zoomed out view of your business to look at how much has my business grown in the last week and why? Which one of my drivers changed? What affected it? Why did my startup grow? You know, which KPI was the main driver? And it could be any part of your funnel. It could be any of your drivers. And the second reason why this thing is important is you can do a sensitivity analysis. So let's say we have 3 different drivers here. You would drag this out to, let's say, 54 weeks, right, in a year, or how many ever, 18 months, whenever you would drag it out, and say, if I were to work on this particular conversion rate and change it by 3% now, how would it affect me 12 months from now? Because right now you have very limited time and resources. How would you decide which part of, which level must you be moving in your business? So if you build out a business model, which is a business growth model, you can do sensitivity analysis on what is the most important lever in your business. I can take some quick questions on this now, but we'll go into details of this in the afternoon as well. Yes?
Where do you correlate with organic and
Yeah, so everything is just a formula. So you would just have where are your visitors coming from. If you have organic, you would just put it right here and say, and add it up to visitors. This is just some business I put together. So organic is, if you're talking in terms of visitors, it would just add up to total visitors. So right here in this, total visitors is equal to visitors from SEO, from paid and direct. I've just had 3 sources. You may have 2 sources, 10 sources. Your business would look different. Does this make sense? It sort of would make more sense as we go through today, the rest of the sessions. This sort of takes the pain away from what we see again and again as startups not having a clear picture of exactly why they're doing what they're doing. You have such limited resources, you have to prioritize and be focused on a single goal, and that's lack of focus, lack of prioritization. And like we all know the story. I'm sure you all have the FOMO. Like you see this latest blog post about this coolest feature you can build or this latest growth hack you can do, and you're like, oh, let me try that, right? So there's always that happening where you're hearing about the latest and greatest thing. Whether to do that or not, you need a decision-making framework, whether it's useful for you right now or not. So this is the result of what you would see. But to get here, you would put all your ideas in a backlog, and you would also prioritize this backlog as like, you know, there's a prioritization framework. So this afternoon, we will go through a way to brainstorm some experiments for you, which is the 2:45 session. Brainstorm your experiments. So at the 1:45 session, we'll go through that KPI sheet, and for each of you, we'll have this as a way for you to break down your business to fill out that KPI sheet that we just saw. And then the next session after that was just brainstorming on like how each of you would brainstorm individually, and we'd help you with that on the different experiments you could be running to work on to pull the different levers to grow your business. And then we'll help you understand how to prioritize them, right? Which experiment to run first, and how to go through that decision-making framework. So that's the schedule for today. And then you can do that, and then we also have another hands-on session at 4:30. We can just walk around and make sure like you're all set with your business growth sheet. Now that I'm here, I'll just walk through the schedule. Okay. Tomorrow, the 9 a.m. talk, Heathen Shah is the founder of Kissmetrics, Crazy Egg, a lot of really interesting startups, big ones, and a lot of one of the growth mentions in the Bay Area, and he'll be here talking about, again, a very basic talk on how to prepare for growth. What we've seen is, you hear me, but then you hear multiple people say the same thing in multiple different languages, and then it sort of starts to sink in. It doesn't matter how big your company is. They're all doing something similar. So it's good to learn from his experience on how it is that he built Kissmetrics and Crazy Egg and so on. And he will touch also on A/B testing. And then the retention and cohort analysis we looked at. So she will look at, just different examples of how to do it. And one of the inputs into your growth is your UX itself, your user experience. That determines most of your conversion rates. So tomorrow there'll be a talk on conversion rates and talk on how to improve your user experience to improve your conversion rates. And then the analytics on what to measure that we look at today, how to measure it. So how to set up your events in Mixpanel and Amplitude. The technical parts of it, we look at it tomorrow. And we look at just some user personas and acquisition channel prioritization. Again, most of these are fodder for you to brainstorm on what sort of experiments that you can be running. And then beyond that, day 3 and day 4 is all different top of the funnel acquisition channels. All the different ways you could be acquiring customers is what Wednesday and Thursday is all about. And Friday is all about B2B. Whether you are a B2B business or B2C business, most of these talks are super relevant, except let's say, you can be super specific, like developer marketing may or may not be relevant to you if you're not selling to developers. Building a community for growth may or may not be relevant to you depending on how big, I knew a company whose entire target market was 100 customers. They were selling to electrical, grids or whatever. They can't build a community with that, so that would not be relevant for them. Referrals, again, if your customers love you and they have the power to bring in other customers, referral marketing is a good talk to attend. If you have anything that's intent-based, then you should be doing SEM or SEO, and then so all things AdWords would be interesting and SEO would be interesting for you. Facebook ads, if you ever want to test anything out very quickly, and if your customers can anyway be found in Facebook ads are the easiest way for you to test them out, so you'd be running that. Oh, and this guy, I'll tell you a little bit more about him in a bit, but he's the head of growth at Atlassian. It's an Australian company which is over $5 billion, a huge company. He started the growth team 0 to now about 45 people. Even though it's a huge company, he doesn't think like a huge company. He thinks like a very, very small startup. So it's super interesting. I've heard him talk a couple of times. Just to look at, if you guys think you're taking risks, most of the startups are like, I don't want to send 10 emails to my customers, or like, I don't want to put this feature out, or I don't want to send this video out, it looks ugly. You should listen to the type of risks he takes for a $5 billion company, right? So they do the same sort of like brainstorming of experiments and prioritizing which experiments to run and figuring out. Their growth process is very similar, and there's so much to learn from him as well. So that's a fireside chat on Wednesday with pizza and beer or some equally unhealthy food and drink. Yay, people are awake. Good to know. Email and content marketing, again, if you do not have a product that sells very quickly and very immediately, and even otherwise, email is a good way to nurture your customers. And even with advertising, if you advertise to them, it takes multiple tries before you can close somebody. So if you can get their email ID and nurture them over a period of time and get them to be your customers, email is a really good marketing tool. So is content marketing if you want to build domain authority and thought leadership in any area. And then if you're a mobile product, AJ, again, has sold a couple of companies before, mobile companies. He knows everything about mobile acquisition. This is, again, for you to know that it's not that different from all the other acquisition, but there's slightly some different, very, very few differences, and AJ can talk about that. And if you're a B2B company and you want to grow purely through content marketing, like HubSpot, many other companies who do content marketing purely for B2B, you should attend this talk by Ryan. He started Scripted, and most of his acquisition was B2B content. Remarketing, if you're spending money on ads, you must attend remarketing, because if you spend money on them once, how to spend less money on them to bring them again next time. Remarketing is useful. Selling to enterprises, enterprise sales, that one was obvious. And if you want to assemble a sales team or generate leads, And this cold outreach, whether it's cold email, cold call, it doesn't have to be just B2B. Again, some of these might come in use for you when you're trying to reach out to investors, maybe, or any other kind of cold outreach, even if it's a BD outreach, or for some reason you want a partnership with somebody. How do you do a cold outreach? That's a talk. Pricing and positioning is an interesting talk if you've not nailed down your pricing yet and you want to figure out, if you're leaving money on the table or how much more you can get out of it. We may have an email automation talk if it's not covered in other talks. But that's, again, if you're doing a lot of inbound through cold emails, then how do you set up a drip automated, depending on the user action or inaction? That's drip emails. Okay, so I went all over the place, and we'll come back again here. So again, if you're a post-product market fit business, you already have users who are using you, and you want to get more of them and keep these and extract more of the existing users, as in make it easy for them to get to the core experience quickly and love your product and stay there longer. So that's what you're doing with funnel optimization, trying to figure out where your main levers are and how to move them, trying to identify what the main areas of impact is. And if you want to expand beyond that to new acquisition channels or new customers, how would you do that? That's all day 3 and 4, and any kind of new features. The things we don't cover here is new product stuff. We are covering growth stuff and not product stuff. Okay, so the other thing about post-product market fit, now you have a bunch of quantitative data. You do have thousands of users. Even if you're not thousands of users, you're a B2B with like just a handful of users, you have more data now than you had when you were more qualitative data based. Just bear with me. This sounds a bit boring, but it's super, super, super useful. Parts of growing up, you have to deal with boring stuff. Okay, so analytics. I know most of you have Google Analytics. Beyond that, how many of you have event-based analytics like Mixpanel or Amplitude or? Okay, so. This afternoon's talk on analytics and tomorrow's talk on how to set up those analytics, super important, because when you want to scale, you want to know what works right now that you can double down on, right? So you want to be able to dig into existing data, existing customers, to know who are my best customers, where are they coming from, what makes them a best customer, what did they do earlier, can you do a regression analysis? Do you remember famously like Facebook's growth equation was 7 users in 10 days. How do you think they came up with that? Right? They had a whole bunch of users and all the different behaviors of these users that they did a regression analysis on, and they said, oh, you know what? If my new user makes friends with at least 7 people within the first 10 days, or maybe 10 friends in 7 days, I don't know, one of those, then they're more likely to stick around. Right? So to understand those insights about your customer, about which product category of yours is most popular, or where is it that they're spending the most amount of time on, what part of it is most exciting to them, how do you get more of them? To understand that, to scale your business, you need to know about how your business works right now. So analytics gives you all that information of when, what, how much, but it doesn't give you why. So the why part you have to ask. So you can't be engineers and sitting in your, at your desks. You have to get out of the building. You have to talk to your customers. You have to get the phone banged on your face. Otherwise, you're not taking enough risks. You have to put yourself out there and talk to enough people so you understand the whys. Whatever hypothesis you come up with, so you look at the data and it's performing a certain way, you think something's happening there. So you look at the data and say, oh, it looks like my customers are spending so much time here because maybe they love this feature. Maybe because they love browsing. Actually, they might actually be spending time there because they're lost, because your UX is not easy enough to understand. You will not know that until you talk to them and run a bunch of experiments as well. There's 2 parts to it. You have to collect the qualitative data, but you also have to quantitatively run an experiment and reinforce that, because people usually, they don't know what they want, number one. So you can never ask them what they want. But they might also not tell you exactly they might not want to hurt you, or like there might be multiple reasons why they won't tell you exactly why they did something. And Matt Lerner will cover this tomorrow, but if you give like a few options to people on like, hey, why did you do this? And they'll be like, oh, I didn't have time, or it was too expensive. Those are the super easy excuses that comes to people's minds. So if you were to run a survey, I would suggest putting that at the bottom usually, so they would pick something else. But anyway, so just some example of analytics. Kik Messenger, I was just looking at this in TechCrunch the other day. They have, the average user chats about 6.1 times a day and about 12 minutes per session. So that's their engagement metric, right? And I made up a retention metric. I said 65% of their users are still active after 1 month. So that would be the retention metric. And the other 2 points were something that they put out. They said about their super users, about 10% of them are super users. Again, this is part of the homework, or if you dig into your data, this is part of the homework. If you dig into your data, you'll see it'll sort of follow a normal distribution curve. You'll have a set of them who are super active, who are super users, and set of them who actually don't care about you at all, and everybody else falls in the normal distribution. Right now, with your analytics, you probably have average numbers. Averages are nice, but that's not where all your, that's not where your goodies are. That's not where your cookies are. You know, you go for the extremes. You figure out who are these people who love me, and why do they love me, and how do I go get more of them, right? So you have to look at who your power users are, your best users are, and we look at this tomorrow evening at 2 o'clock or 2:45, that power user segmentation. So you can go get more of those folks. And then, and where they come from and so on and so forth, so you can look at acquisition. So anyway, so analytics are powerful. That was the point of that slide. So do analytics if you're not doing them. So the metric that you're tracking, if you're a post-product market fit company, is that you're focused on growth rate. So how much am I growing week over week? So growth rate of what? What do you think is most useful? Whether, do you think it should be growth rate of users, customers, anything here? Depends on what? It depends on what metric that matters. Usually, strategically, it's about depends on how much money you have in the bank. That's what it all comes down to for an early stage startup. You're just going to die. We don't know whether it's tomorrow or 10 years from now, right? Hopefully, you don't become like Yahoo or something. But anyway, or wait that long like Yahoo. But it depends on how much money you have in the bank. If you have a lot of money, then you could actually be optimizing for your users, right? But if you don't, then you are optimizing for your customers or your revenue, or in fact even your profits if you are, if you're going to be bootstrapped and so on. So really, what your one metric is, it's going to depend on where you are. So the next few talks will help you understand that better. Okay, so if you're a post-product market fit startup, you're focused on scalable, repeatable growth because you won't die of exhaustion if you do it in a process-oriented manner. And you are looking for all these leaks on how to plug your leaks and extract the most value out of your product. That's your optimizations that you're doing. You have a lot more quantitative data. You're focused on growth rate. But the process that you use for that, so we went through this. You have to be adults now and start using a process, which is, we're just going to call it a growth machine or a growth scrum. So if you listen to that talk by Brian Balfour, he's calling it a growth machine, right? So growth machine is actually not a tactic, but it's a mindset and a process. And you start with your whatever your goal is. So you could start with your 3-month goal, and you can even have a 1-week goal. What is it for the next week that we're trying to grow? Usually it's better that you have at least a 3-month goal and you start back from there and work towards it for the next 3 months. Once you have your goal, this is something you saw in your video, I'm just repeating it. Once you have your goal, you're going to brainstorm all the different experiments, the hypothesis and the experiments on how to grow to hit that goal. And then you prioritize all those experiments and you run the tests. That's what you do. So let's say you run your growth meetings on Monday. For an hour, you sit there and say, okay, you know, I've picked my metric. I want to grow my revenue month over month for the next 3 months. So what are the experiments I'm going to run next week? So you're going to pick your 5 to 8 experiments, right? And it's got to be at least that many because the more you run, most of them are going to fail, so the momentum is better for you. So you run those experiments and then you analyze the results of the experiments and come back next Monday and say, what happened? I ran 7 experiments last week. How many of them won? How many of them failed? Or like, it doesn't matter whether they succeeded or failed. If they were conclusive, it's a great experiment. You learned, you know, 250 ways how not to build a light bulb is way better than like running an experiment and it being inconclusive. So you have a conclusive way that you've either validated or invalidated your hypothesis. You learn something from it and that feeds back into a new experiment that you're going to run next week or whenever, depending on how we adjust your priorities. So that's pretty much how it's going to be, your growth process is going to be. It's just another way of showing it to you. So meeting there your Monday morning. You have a bunch of ideas that will come up in the brainstorming today, and with everything you do with your growth mentor, and this week you'll come with a bunch of growth ideas. You already have many of them. You put them in a backlog. You create a pipeline out of it, as in like, okay, this week I'm going to run this kind of thing, and you run a whole bunch of A/B tests and you document them. You run a whole bunch of A/B tests and you analyze what the results are. So this is your growth process that you'll be following here. I know I'm belaboring this point, but trust me, otherwise it's just so easy to get lost. You will end up doing a lot of things and feel like I'm doing a lot, but I'm not growing. Am I doing the right things? So, which is why going back to the process. This is what I say to people, like, it's like you can't get a six-pack overnight or like in 4 days by dreaming about it. You have to go to the gym and work out every day. And that's what a growth process is. You have to have the discipline to follow the process. And that will lead you to growth, because there are no silver bullets in growth. They're all a bunch of lead bullets, because you're doing a bunch of optimizations. So you have to be process oriented and disciplined, or there's no way for you to like just hit some lucky spike and like look like this. Nobody's curve ever looked like this. Okay, it was like a whole bunch of things that they smoothed out to look like that. That's just life. Okay. So this is just an example, a very quick, very simple example. So you're going to define your goal, and I want to be at 30K monthly revenue in 3 months. That's my goal. So I'm going to pick my key metrics. So if I want revenue, then I need more visitors. I need to increase my visitor to purchase conversion rate. I'm not going to care about my average cart value, whatever, right? I only pick these two as my key metrics that I'm going to change. Of this, I'm going to be brainstorming some hypothesis on why is my visitor to purchase conversion rate low? Because they don't trust me. That's my hypothesis. They don't trust my website, which is very true. None of you users give a damn about you, right? Like, they don't care who you are. Only you care about who you are. To them, they care about their problems. So it's up to you to help them, to help convince them that you will solve their problem in the right way. So then you brainstorm experiments. What can I do with my website or my app to increase trust? So I can put in testimonials, I can put in return guarantees, and then you implement it. So testimonials will take you like, I don't know, even if you fake testimonials for 2 days, right? It's going to take you like 2 hours to put it in, and some sort of a return guarantee. It'll take you 4 hours to put it in, whatever. And then you let the experiment run until it reaches statistical significance. So about 1,000 people have gone through it, or you have 100 conversions. You have 100 conversions through it, and then you A/B test. So you have a control and a variant. So you know that, nothing changed today all of a sudden that made it different from last week. It's the same 1,000 people who came in, 500 went through here, 500 went through here, or how many ever that was needed to do the conversions. So if you do a A/B test where you have a control and a variant, you know for sure whether it worked or not. So let's say in my results, I saw the testimonials increased revenue by 20%. That's conclusive. So then what I would do is I would then go ahead, systematize this as in like I would put it in the product. Just, we may touch this some point of time when we're talking about hiring and growth. There's a little bit of a difference between a product engineer and a growth engineer. So product engineer builds for like legacy. They want to build beautiful code and like this is going to be my legacy kind of thing. A growth engineer is more of a hacker. They build ugly code because they're just more focused on, they're very entrepreneurial minded, they're more focused on just looking at results. Like, I'm going to put this thing together and see whether it works or not. And of course you have to go back and fix it, but you do end up with a bunch of engineering debt because you are exploring a whole bunch of things. So, try to understand whether the engineer in your team is a product engineer or a growth engineer. If you don't have a growth engineer, it might be useful to hire somebody who's got the experiment-driven mentality that, they're not, they're willing to hack together stuff just to see if it works or it doesn't work. That speed is important. So, and you rinse and repeat. So, Sean Close, the Atlassian guy who's coming here on Wednesday, he said this. So he said running experiments is like playing Battleship, right? So you ping until you hear, you get a hit, and then you double down and run more experiment around that area until you sink that ship, until you've maximized the ROI of that channel or that part of the funnel. So what this means is really like, and this is a guy who's run millions of experiments, and this is true with everybody regardless of the size of the company you run. You can make educated guesses about where to run experiments or what sort of experiments to run, but most of your experiments are going to fail. It is like playing Battleship. You don't know where the the U-boat is, and you don't know where the the 5 thingy is like whoever. How many of you have played Battleship? Yeah. All right. So you know what I'm talking about. So the 2 things and the 3 pegs and the the 4 pegs and 5 pegs, you just don't even know which one you hit if you hit it. You need to hit all around it. You need to double down on it to see if you've maximized it. So basically that's what you'll be doing is, playing Battleship with your experiments. So which means most of your experiments are going to fail, which means what you really need, what's more important, along with following why the process is important, is it gives you a mindset. Most of your growth strategies won't work. You have to accept that. And the ones that work will eventually stop. And growth is never done. You're not done. It doesn't matter what size of a company you are. You are always going to be exploring new channels for growth. It's like gold mining, right? Like you go hit a rich vein, you can mine it, and then the vein dries out. So you're always, hoping that you have 2 or 3 rich veins and you're exploring for 1 or 2. So you should always be exploring for newer channels, newer features, newer optimizations to bring you that a little bit of next growth, that lead bullet. Because anytime you mine something, you hit a limit with it. Even if you run, let's say Facebook ads are running well for you, there's a limit to how much you can spend on Facebook ads. After a point, you run out of people that you can acquire and your CPA goes up and it no longer is profitable for you to acquire through Facebook. So then the mindset is what is most important. Again, the reason we're having this process is so you don't burn out. So please remember that, don't be the pessimist. Remember that it's not about failure. It's about, everything's about a lesson learned, that you've validated or invalidated a hypothesis. The dumbest thing you can do is assume that you know about your customers. You know nothing about your customers, all right? You've got to go validate it by both talking to them and looking at your data. All you have about your problem, your solution and your customers are all hypotheses that need to be validated with experiments. So everything that you do, you're learning. So you're learning the 250 ways how not to build a light bulb. So, and that's super important. As I said, the only bad experiment is the experiment that's inconclusive. Even if it conclusively tells you that it didn't work, that's great. Now you know how not to build a light bulb. Right? And just move fast. Because again, even huge companies, as he's going to come talk about it, unless you have the guts to go, ping in some other part of the board, you're not going to find out. You can't just keep pinging around where you are. You have to make, take bigger risks in the type of experiments you're going to run. And because most of your experiments are going to fail, momentum is really important to outrun failure. So if 4 of your 5 experiments are going to fail, you have to run at least 5 experiments, so at least one can succeed. Because week after week, if you only run 1 or 2 experiments and they're all failing most of the time, you'll just be dejected. So momentum is important. So faster learning equal to faster earnings. All right, I came up with that. He laughed. That was a win. So whether you are pre-product market fit or post-product market fit, this is very true of how you're going to be running whatever you run, right? You are going to be focused on, your goals are going to be different. One is product market fit, the other is growth, but how you do it is going to be all the same. So learn as quickly as you can without burning yourself out. That's the most important part. If you take anything out of it, follow the process. It's like exercising, so you'll get a 6-pack. So have the discipline to follow the process and have a experiment-focused mindset so you don't burn out when you do it. So going back to the same thing, whether you're pre or post, you're focusing on learning really quickly. That's the most important part. And that's it.